Bubble Witch Podcast, Episode 8, Lammas, Week 3, Hearth, Home, and Warmth. Welcome back, friends. I'm glad you're here. Wherever you've found yourself today, I hope you've settled into a comfortable little corner for a while. Maybe you're working on a craft. Maybe you're driving home from work. Maybe you're folding laundry. Or maybe you've finally managed to sit down with a warm cup of tea before the rest of the world remembers you exist. However you arrived, welcome. Last week, we spent some time gathering tiny joys. We talked about the little moments that quietly feed our hearts, the things we often overlook because they happen every day. A favorite mug, a family story, a sleepy kitten that accidentally took a bubble bath. The laughter that somehow sneaks in between busy moments. Those little things, the ones that don't seem important while they're happening, have a funny way of becoming the memories we treasure the most. This week, I'd like to wander in a slightly different direction because I've been thinking. Actually, I've been overthinking. Now, if you've been listening for a while, that probably doesn't surprise you very much. I have a tendency to pull up a chair, pour another cup of tea, and think something to death. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's just an excuse to drink more tea. Either way, it's where this week's conversation began. I've been thinking about the way we move through the seasons. When I first started creating Bubble Witch, I wasn't thinking about books or podcasts or planners. I was simply paying attention to the rhythm that felt natural to me. About 5 weeks before each Sabbath, I begin noticing. I find myself looking a little closer at the world around me, the way the light changes, the smell of the evenings, the flowers that are beginning to fade, the ones that are just beginning to bloom. Without really planning it, I begin gathering ideas, recipes, little bits of inspiration, fabric, stories. By the time the Sabbath arrives, I've already been living inside that season for weeks. It's never felt forced. It's simply how I naturally move through the wheel. So when I started writing these little books, that's the rhythm I used. It made sense because it was familiar. It was home. But over the past few weeks, I've realized something. That rhythm belongs to me. It doesn't have to belong to everyone. Some of you may have started this journey with me the very first week. Some of you may have picked up the little book on Lammas Day. Some of you may have stumbled across this podcast halfway through the season. And some of you might discover Bubble Witch months from now and decide to save everything until next year. For a little while, I caught myself worrying about that. I wondered, are people going to feel like they've missed something? Will they think they're behind? And then I laughed at myself, because that's the exact opposite of everything Bubble Witch has ever tried to be. I've never wanted this to become another checklist, another schedule, another place where someone feels like they're failing because life got busy. Goodness knows. Life gets busy. Sometimes wonderfully busy. Sometimes painfully busy. Sometimes we barely remember what day of the week it is. Nature understands that. The seasons have never demanded perfection. The sun doesn't refuse to rise because yesterday was cloudy. The creepy little crickets don't stop singing because you forgot to sit on the porch last night. The wildflowers don't bloom according to our calendars. Nature simply keeps extending the invitation. Tomorrow, there will be another sunset, another breeze, another chance to step outside, another opportunity to notice. And I think that's one of the kindest lessons nature has to offer. So I don't want you to think of these little books as calendars. Instead, think of them as companions. They're 6-week journeys. You can begin them 5 weeks before the Sabbath, just like I do. You can begin on the Sabbath itself. Or you can begin whenever your heart finally has room to breathe. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The season isn't grading your attendance. It's simply happy you arrived. I wish more things in life worked that way. Can you imagine? Imagine if we greeted ourselves with that same kindness. I know you're tired. I know life got in the way. I'm just glad you're here. No guilt, no catching up, no feeling like you've somehow missed the magic. Because the magic isn't waiting on a particular date. It's waiting in the noticing. It's waiting in the slowing down. It's waiting in the choice to pay attention to this moment instead of wishing you'd started sooner. And I suppose that brings us to this week's chapter, Hearth, Home, and Warmth. When I sat down to write this week's chapter, I kept coming back to one word, hearth. It's an old word, one we don't hear very often anymore. I think because when we hear it, our minds tend to picture a great big stone fireplace with a roaring fire, a cozy little cottage, fresh bread cooling on the counter, a kettle quietly steaming in the background. It's a lovely picture. But I don't think that's what a hearth really is. A hearth has always been the heart of a home, the place where people naturally gathered, where meals were shared, where stories were told, where children learned by watching the grown-ups around them, where laughter happened, where tears happened, where ordinary life quietly unfolded. It isn't really about bricks or stone or fire. It's about belonging. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized we all still have hearths. They just don't all look the same. For me, it's my sewing room. Now, if you've ever imagined that I have this beautiful sewing studio, I probably ought to clear that up. It's tiny, like 35 square feet tiny. There are fabric scraps everywhere. Thread somehow migrates into places thread has absolutely no business being. My scissors have apparently entered witness protection because I can never find them when I need them. And there's almost always at least one cat supervising the entire operation, usually by lying directly on whatever I'm trying to work on. Apparently, that's quality control. If someone walked into that little room, they probably wouldn't think much of it. They'd see a sewing machine, totes full of fabric, projects waiting patiently for me to finish them. Nothing particularly remarkable. But I see something different. I see where Bubble Witch quietly comes to life. It's where the little books are written, where the journals begin, where bubble buddies slowly take shape, where tea wallets and gathering baskets and aprons first exist as ideas before they ever become something you can hold in your hands. It's where I dream. It's where I create. It's where I gather the little pieces of a season and slowly stitch them together. I suppose that's my hearth. Not because it's perfect, not because it's beautiful all the time, but because it's the place where my heart settles. A few of the questions in this week's chapter asks, what makes your space feel safe? What makes your body unclench a little? What helps you feel cared for? I think those are beautiful questions, because your answer probably isn't going to look like mine. Maybe your hearth is your kitchen table. Maybe it's your workshop. Maybe it's a porch swing. Maybe it's your garden. Maybe it's a fishing boat. Maybe it's the chair where your dog always curls up beside you. Or maybe it's simply the place where you finally remember to breathe. Whatever it is, I hope you never underestimate it, because those little places quietly take care of us. You know, I've noticed something about us humans. We're really good at working, not always very good at resting. In fact, we almost apologize for it. Have you ever caught yourself saying, I didn't really get much done today? Or, I just sat on the porch for a while. I only read my book. I only worked in the garden. As though we need to defend those moments, as though they somehow don't count. Nature has never apologized for resting. The fields don't. The trees don't. The gardens don't. Even the wheel of the year gives us a space in between, a pause before the next beginning. If nature understands that rest is part of the rhythm, maybe we can stop treating it like we've somehow failed. One of my favorite lines from this week's chapter says, "Warm carbohydrates have emotionally stabilized humanity for centuries." Now, I don't know if you'll find that in any scientific journal, but I have absolutely no intention of arguing with it. There's just something comforting about warm bread, or a bowl of soup, or butter melting into toast, not because the food itself is magical. Although in my world, food is pretty magical, but because of what it represents, someone taking the time to nourish themselves, or someone else, a moment of slowing down, a reason to gather. Comfort has gotten a bad reputation. Somewhere along the way, we started believing we had to earn it, that we could rest after one more chore, after one more email, after one more load of laundry, after one more thing. But comfort isn't the reward for finishing life. It's part of what helps us live it. Maybe that's why this week's chapter speaks to me so much. It reminds us that comfort isn't weakness. It's support. And support is something every living thing needs. So this week, I'd like to leave you with a simple invitation. Don't worry about whether you're celebrating Lammas perfectly. Don't worry if you started this journey late. Instead, notice your hearth. Notice the place where you naturally gather, the place where your shoulders soften, the place where your spirit quietly says, I'm home. Spend a little time there this week. No checklist, no expectations, just gratitude. Now, let's open this week's Tiny Season Companion and see what little invitation is waiting for us. This week's card is a rest card. Put down one thing that can wait. I smiled when I pulled this one, because after everything we've talked about today, it feels like the season is gently nodding its head and saying, yes, exactly. Not everything has to happen today. The laundry can wait. That email can probably wait. The dishes will still be there in half an hour. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to stop carrying everything all at once. One thing. Just one. Set it down. Not forever. Just long enough to breathe. Long enough to enjoy your cup of tea while it's still warm. Long enough to sit in your hearth. Long enough to watch the evening light drift across the room. Long enough to remember that your worth has never been measured by how much you accomplish in a single day. This week, I'd invite you to listen to the card. Put down one thing that can wait, then spend that little pocket of time somewhere that feels like home. I have a feeling both you and the thing you're worrying about will still be there when you come back. Whether you're following along with the Bubble Witch's Little Book of Llamas, or you're simply joining me here each week. Thank you. Thank you for sharing another little piece of the season with me. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself, make a little magic, embrace a little mischief, accept the occasional chaos, and remember, Your hearth isn't measured by its size, it's measured by how it makes you feel. I'll meet you again, somewhere between the bubbles and the tea,